Hello, this is 제1화 from Korea Biotechnology Industry Organization. Welcome to our very first Bio TV special broadcast with Dr. Bob Langer, the co-founder of Moderna, with Dr. BJ Ri as our special host today. Korea Bio has been focusing on supporting our member companies, which consist mainly of small and medium-sized biotech startups in Korea, to expand their business to a more global scale. And while having that goal, we have come up with a program called Global Mingle, which is a series of events, conferences, IR roadshows, international exhibitions that links the Korean biotechs to the global bio industry. Along with that, our organization's mission is to promote our member companies to go to a global scale and meet the global scale audience. And we are using our Bio TV YouTube channel to achieve that goal. And through Bio TV, we are consistently broadcasting some of the biotech issues in Korea and in-depth interviews about those CEOs that represent the star companies. And today, on our very first New Year's episode of our special broadcast, I am thrilled to have Dr. Langer and Dr. Ri to enlighten us. But before we go into the talk, and I hand over the mic to Dr. Ri, I would like to let the audience know that today's talk will mainly focus on business and biotech as an industry, just as the title hints, science to business. Because the goal for today is to sort of guide the early stage biotech startups to their next roadway to going global. Let me introduce our two guests today. Dr. Robert Langer is one of the 12 institute professors at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Being an institute professor is the highest honor that can be awarded to a faculty member. He has written over 1,500 articles, which have been cited over 360,000 times. His H-index of 297 is the highest of any engineering history, and the fourth highest of any individual in any field. His patents have licensed over sub-licensed to over 400 companies, and he is a co-founder of a number of companies, including Moderna. Dr. Langer served as chairman of the FDA's Science Board, its highest advisory board, from 1999 to 2002. His over 220 awards include both the United States National Medal of Science and the United States National Medal of Technology and Innovation. He is one of the 3 living individuals to have received both these honors: the Charles Stark Draper Prize, often called the Engineering Nobel Prize, and the Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering, just to name a few. He holds a 36 honorary doctorates and has been elected to the National Academy of Medicine, the National Academy of Engineering, the National Academy of Sciences, and the National Academy of Inventors. Our host, Dr. Byung-gun Ri, brings 36 years of experience in research and management in biotechnology, as well as pharmaceuticals. His previous position was the president and CEO at SCM Life Sciences, vice chairman of CKD, president and CEO at Green Cross, president and CEO at Expression Genetics in the US, and former chairman of Korea Biotechnology Industry Organization, and chairman of Council for Advanced Regenerative Medicine. He is currently serving as a chairman of Korea Support Committee for International Vaccine Institute, IVI, and as a non-executive director at the Korea Health Industry Development Institute. He's also a member of National Academy of Engineering Korea. He earned his bachelor's and master's in chemical engineering from Seoul National University. He received his PhD degree in chemical biomedical engineering at Rice University, and he received an Outstanding Engineering Alumni Award just last year. Dr. Ri is one of the few industry leaders and an expert in bringing innovative new texts from clinical trials to actual practice. It is such an honor to have the 2 life science industry leaders here with us today to share their insights and know-how and their enthusiasm toward the bio industry. I don't want to take any more time. Dr. Langer and Dr. Rhee, please enlighten us. The mic is yours, Dr. Rhee.
Hi, Bob. Happy New Year. This is our great honor to have you for this first bio episode event. You may know you are the most well-known and the most popular Polish scientist in Korea. You and I are known for more than 25 years, and you also served as a board member of our Expression Genetics. And I still remember we used to have a board meeting in your beautiful house in Newton. Today, we will not talk much about the science, but we'll talk more about your life and the philosophy. First question is, please briefly tell us, the audience, about your life, which turned from chemical engineer to life scientist and entrepreneur, and your philosophy.
Well, thank you so much. So, I grew up, I had a pretty normal childhood, went to Cornell and MIT, and I majored in chemical engineering, not unlike yourself. When I got done, I'm a little bit older than you, in 1974, everybody in my class pretty much went to work for oil companies. And I wasn't very excited about that. And I was looking for something that I could do that I felt would help a lot of people with their health or with their education. And I ended up working with a man named Judah Folkman at Children's Hospital. And I was the only engineer there. And what he wanted me to work on was to see if we could isolate substances that could stop blood vessels from growing. People didn't believe that was possible, but we were able to do it. One of the things that was critical in enabling us to do it was to design tiny little micro or nanoparticles that could release large molecules. And these molecules that we were trying to isolate, these blood vessel inhibitors, they were large molecules. So at any rate, we did that. People were very skeptical when I did it. The work was criticized. My first 9 grants were rejected. I'm a chemical engineer, and I tried to get faculty positions at chemical engineering departments. No chemical engineering department in the world would hire me. I ended up going to a nutrition department. But I continued the work, and I kept trying to understand better and better how these systems work and make them better and better. The blood vessel inhibitors, of course, those became, many years later, because of work at Genentech and other places, blockbuster drugs, like Avastin, which was the first one that got approved, but many others too. The drug delivery systems, the little microspheres and nanospheres, that was important also, as I'll get to. But one of the things that happened is I published papers. We published papers in journals like Nature and Science, and I thought very naively that if we published them, people would use them. And they did use them academically, but I really felt that they could help people because they could protect these molecules that we were isolating and possibly make new therapies. But it didn't seem to me like anybody cared. But anyhow, after about 10 years, a couple of very large companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, did call me up and they asked if I would advise them. And they actually, I mentioned our patents, they licensed them, and they started working on them. And I was very excited about this. But both those large companies, they gave up quickly. When the first experiments didn't work out right, they just gave up. So one of my friends, Alex Klevenoff, said to me, he said, Bob, we should start our own company. So we started this little company, and we got the patents back, and we were able to make little microspheres and nanospheres, and we were able to use them to deliver all kinds of molecules to treat schizophrenia, opioid addiction, and other diseases. And so I could, and what was important to me is I could see that our little company, in contrast to these big companies, everybody would live or die, basically, on our technology. And so they kept trying so hard, and there was a lot of my students who were working there, and they got it to work. And ultimately, this became a multi-billion-dollar company. So that's kind of how I got started. And then we just kept doing it, doing more basic science in the university, but using that science start companies, and we've done it many, many times now. And again, it's always with our students, but a lot of these, have become quite successful companies. Not all, but quite a number of them.
Sure. So many success people talking about big dream. So what was your big dream and what motivates you for this target?
Well, my big dream was to do science that would make a difference in human lives, that we could make discoveries and inventions, but that we could use those discoveries and inventions to really have an impact on the world, on people's health and things like that. And, so doing science, which was curiosity-driven science, but doing it for human good and really seeing that people would use it, that was a dream. I guess in addition to that dream, I've loved working with students, training people in our lab, and and maybe living vicariously through them, as they become professors and as they start their own companies. So another dream has been to train the very, very best people in the world. Actually, we have a number of my students and postdocs who are professors in Korea. Some have even started companies in Korea.
Well, you once said that you are a family man. I'm guarantee you are a family man. Would you briefly tell about your family now?
Sure. Well, I'm very lucky. I married a wonderful woman, my wife Laura. She went to Harvard as an undergraduate. I met her when she was getting her PhD in neuroscience at MIT. And we've been together, 34 years now. We'll be married 34 years in July. We've been together, I guess, 36 years. We have 3 children. Michael is the oldest. He's 32. He works at Pear Therapeutics, which is a digital medicine company. They just went public, actually. They have apps that are approved by FDA for treating different diseases. My daughter, Susan, is 30. She'll be 31 on Sunday, and she she worked at Biogen for about 6.5 years when she graduated, and actually she was promoted about 7 times, became head of corporate strategy, and then became the acting president of a startup company. Now is actually helping run 2 startup companies, which she's done great. And my youngest son, Sam, he's 27, and he is actually kind of working on new kinds of internet entertainment. Working on I actually call it something like Broadway on the internet. But he's working with some friends and doing some amazing things. So all 3 of them I'm very proud of, and I feel very lucky to have such a great wife and family. I was lucky growing up to have a wonderful mother and sister.
Yes, when I met first Michael, he was a small kid and he was a Republican. Is he still Republican? Yes.
I would say he probably still is. I don't think he's a Donald Trump fan, but I think he's still a Republican.
Okay.
In fact, it's very funny. Just one story. I remember Sunwon Kim, who we both knew well and was a wonderful person. I remember when Michael was 4 years old. Michael was always interested in money. So when he was 4, I remember I was at a conference and Sunwon Kim gave me some coins. He gave me a coin from Japan and from Korea, and then I gave him that, and I said, "Here's a Japanese coin and a Korean coin." And he said, "Well, is there a Chinese coin too?" He
Yes.
wondered where that was. But yeah, and I think he's still Republican. You have a very good memory.
Yes. As Bob mentioned, Dr. Sung Kim, who passed last year, has introduced me to the Bob, and we still miss Dr. Kim. You and your team has established more than 40 companies. Please tell us how you could do this.
Well, yeah. So of course it didn't happen overnight. It takes a long time, and from all over the world, including Korea, and wonderful postdocs too. And, you know, they do basic research in the lab. A lot of the lab research might be on nanotechnology, drug delivery systems, for example. It could be on genetic therapies, including messenger RNA or short interfering RNAs. We also have done a lot of work on creating new tissues and organs. But basically what happens is somebody might work on their thesis for, say, 4 or 5 years or postdoctoral work, and we make some progress. And, you know, we prove that this idea might work or that this invention might be able to work. We publish it in, you know, very good journals like Science or Nature, but we also patent it. And a lot of times what happens is the students or postdocs, and also it could be people I know, friends of mine, but, you know, who've done this, they say, well, can we start a company? So it's evolved over time, but when we first started doing this, you know, what I call venture capitalists, they would come to see me and they'd say, well, could we help you? Could we give you some money? And in return, they would get equity. And then I might be on the board of directors, and my students who worked on this might have key employee positions at the company. So that's often how they get started. And then they keep growing. It's almost like a little child growing up. You know, it might start with 1 or 2 people. And, you know, but then, you know, we make more scientific progress, more on the development side, rather than the research side, but we do research too. And the companies get bigger and bigger. And, you know, probably in a way they may need me less and less, but it's been wonderful being a part of those companies. So we've done that about 40 times. We've also licensed a lot of our patents as well to other companies too. It's very important to me when I do work that a couple things happen. One, I really don't want to just do the research. I want to see the research make a difference in the world. And you can only go so far in academia. These companies really have been critical in helping make that difference in terms of doing things like manufacturing and clinical trials that we really can't do at MIT. I mean, we can do the basic research. So that's one thing. And the second thing is to make sure that the students and postdocs who have worked on this, that they often have a dream. And their dream is to start a company, is to be a part of that company, and to see the work they did in their lab, you know, really become products that'll make a difference in the world. So that's generally what we've done.
Okay. Well, can you pick a couple of most successful companies among that 40 companies?
Sure. Well, I suppose the one that's most famous is Moderna. You know, we started Moderna, you know, almost, 11 years ago, and with 3 other people, Derek Rossi, Ken Chen, and Nubar Fay. And Nubar also runs Flagship Pioneering, which is a very good venture firm, and creates companies. They probably call themselves a company creation firm. And, you know, I mean, today Moderna has something like about 25 clinical trials, or 25 different clinical trials. They have all kinds of products, different vaccines, different cancer treatments, treatments for rare diseases, cystic fibrosis, you know, and many other things. We have had a wonderful CEO, Stefan Lancel, you know, wonderful president, Stephen Ho, and it's, you know, I suppose the market capitalization of it's varied, but, you know, today it's probably about $95 billion. It's been almost double that, and of course when we started it was 0, but, you know, it's created COVID vaccine out of messenger RNA, and that's changed the world. There were lots of others too. We started a company with 2 of my other students, Ram Sestaskaran and Ganesh Venakatraman, called Momenta. And there, Ram and Ganesh had made very important contributions to polysaccharide sequencing. Nobody had ever been able to sequence polysaccharides like heparin before. But Ram and Ganesh figured out the first ways to do that. They did that by using a combination of enzymes that could cut, like heparinases, which I originally invented, I didn't, and published in Science. So you have these enzymes that can cut the polysaccharides in specific places, then use mass spectroscopy to analyze the cut segments, and then Ram and Ganesh developed some mathematical models to put the segments together so you can actually get a sequence for those polysaccharides. And Momenta did also very well. They had two products that were FDA approved. One was a low molecular heparin, another was a treatment for multiple sclerosis. And then they also were working on different autoimmune diseases, and Johnson & Johnson acquired them for $6.5 billion US. There are many, many others. I've been involved from the beginning with Alnylam, which is a very successful company developing siRNA therapeutics. With the very first company I mentioned when we were talking about the microspheres, that was a company called Enzotech, which merged to become Alchemies, which has also had many products on the market. But there's others like PureTech. PureTech was started by Daphne Zohar and myself. She's been also an incredible CEO. Seer by Omid Farrakazad, one of my former postdocs, fellows, and now they're doing ways of looking at the proteome. So there have been quite a few. It's always been, I think, I like to think, good science, but also very, very good people who are highly driven, both in the science, but also in the business. It's been a team effort.
Yeah, let's talk more about Moderna. What was your initial involvement with Moderna?
Yeah, so the way Moderna started is Derek Rossi, who was a young scientist, came to see me. He'd made some findings about messenger RNA. Then we talked with him and Ken Chen and Nubar Fayan about creating a company that would make messenger RNA therapeutics. To do that required a couple things. One, being able to make messenger RNA that was effective and safe. Two, and this is where maybe my own background would come in, is you needed to encapsulate them and protect them in little nanoparticles. And as I mentioned, my postdoctoral work, that's actually how I got started, is creating, and actually the first nanoparticles that could deliver macromolecules, and that would include RNA and DNA. This was a paper we published in Nature in 1976. And like I said, when we published it, people were very skeptical. They didn't believe we could do it, but we did do it. And of course, over the years, now many companies have done it as well. But Moderna, we started hiring people. When you start a company, there's a lot of things you have to do almost everything. So I was on the board of directors, I was on the scientific advisory board, but you have to do everything. You have to raise money, you have to help fund lab space, you have to help on patents, you have to help, on scientific strategy. I mean, it was a lot of fun, but it certainly took a lot of time. We would meet once a week in Flagship's offices for about a year in the beginning, mapping out a strategy. Then Nubar, of course, one of the things that's key is finding a great CEO, and Nubar had known Stefan Bancel. I had known him also, but not as well. And Nubar said to me one day, says he thinks that maybe we can attract him to be the CEO of Moderna, and so I would get involved with that. And so we started with this little company. We got some lab space a few blocks from MIT. It wasn't very good lab space, but it was lab space, and that's how we got started. And we, of course, originally would do things in tissue culture and then in small animals. Finally, by 2012, 2013, we were doing things in non-human primates. And then Stefan and Stephen Hogue developed this deal with AstraZeneca to give them 40 targets for heart disease in exchange for $280 million plus milestones plus royalties. And that was transformative from the financial standpoint. And Stefan has continued to do a wonderful job in leading the company in every way. And Stephen has done an unbelievable job in terms of developing the science and, helping get the FDA approvals and things like that. So, and it just grew. Now it's something like 27
Well, can you summarize Moderna's key success factors? Maybe 2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, well, one I'd like to say would be great science. The other was really the leadership. I mean, we had wonderful leadership between Nubar being chairman of the board, Stefan being a great CEO, Stephen being a great president and head of research. So I think the combination of great science and great people, it was also revolutionary technology. I mean, I know even when we first talked about it, I certainly felt this was a company that could change the world. And, you know, it has. But I felt like that we had the elements that would enable that to happen. And so I think great people and great science. You know, we also raised a good deal of funding. And by the way, I should add, it's what I call a platform technology. I think that ends up being important too, because you get what I'll call a lot of shots on goal, to use a hockey expression. When you have a platform technology, you can make messenger RNA and nanoparticles to do so many different things. COVID vaccines, other vaccines, ways to make messenger RNA to treat rare diseases, ways to treat cystic fibrosis. So you can do all kinds of things with the same technology. It's almost what I'll call a plug and play. You use the right kind of nanoparticles and the right type of messenger RNA. And so everything, not necessarily everything will work, maybe because of biology, but the beauty of it is you keep using the same science, the same delivery type of systems, the same manufacturing over and over and over again to treat so many different diseases. And that I also think has been very helpful.
Yes. Would you tell us Moderna's next pipeline briefly?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that Moderna's working on. And, you know, some of them are other vaccines, like for flu, for example, and respiratory diseases. In fact, one of the things Moderna is talking about is having a yearly vaccine for different respiratory diseases like flu, COVID, you know, and other respiratory diseases. And I think that will probably come to pass. I think it's, you know, the data has been so good. Another thing that Moderna is working on are personalized cancer vaccines, which would be not what I'll call a prophylactic vaccine. It would be a therapeutic vaccine that could attack somebody's cancer. And we'd have messenger RNAs that would go after specific types of tumors that we actually can characterize from different patients. That's in clinical trials right now. We're also working on rare diseases that might be like enzyme deficiency diseases. So you could make a messenger RNA to make an enzyme, for example. Cystic fibrosis is another one that we're working with Vertex. So it goes on and on. So there's so many, and heart disease I mentioned with AstraZeneca. So there's an awful lot of different things that Moderna is working on. It's a very, very rich pipeline.
Good. The second company you mentioned, Momenta. Momenta was established in 2001, as I remember. And you once mentioned that you learned a lot from the importance of a good regulatory strategy from Momenta case. Would you tell us about that? Yeah.
Yes, well, that's a very good question. So, you know, to create new molecular entities, you know, that takes a long time. But, so you try to think, well, what ways can you maybe not have to, you know, go through all the huge clinical trials that you have to do for a new molecular entity. And here, what we had at Momenta was a new technology. So what we did is we put the drug, enoxaparin, which are low molecular weight heparins, and that was already approved, but it was going off patent. But nobody before ever was able to sequence these polysaccharides, and we were the first ones that were able to do it. So what we decided to do was ask the question, rather than make what's called an NDA, new drug application, maybe we could do an ANDA, what's called abbreviated new drug application, and make enoxaparin simply by sequencing the heparin that was the reference heparin that other companies made. And then we knew the exact sequence of it. Nobody else could do that because they didn't have the sequencing technology. So we were able to sequence it, and the FDA then make it, and we could then make it by, and again, using our sequencing technology, show that it was exactly the same as the reference material. So we really had to do minimal clinical trials. Rather than spend $1 billion, we spent, something like on the order of maybe $10 million. So that's a good example where we were able to use an A&D rather than, but it proved the technology would work, and then we could use it over and over again for treating different diseases.
Okay, thank you. Well, now we move to the Korean case, okay? So Korean biopharma industry has quite different ecosystem compared to the US. Would you give some tips for young scientists or professors in Korea to encourage for startup companies?
Yeah, well, in general, so I think there's a couple of general formulas. On the science, what we try to do is develop an invention or make a discovery that leads to a platform company. Like I said, Moderna, all these companies that we've done have pretty much been platform. Moderna is a very good example, right? You can use messenger RNA for disease X, Y, Z. So you come up with a platform, and then when you write scientific papers in good journals, and then you patent it. You get the best patents that you can get. In fact, you probably don't want just one patent. You want many patents to really protect your invention compared to everybody else. And maybe you'll have some students who are really good, who really want to work at that company. And then you have to, so that's kind of like the science. But then you also want to have good business partners. So you want to, and this isn't easy, but you want to find a great CEO. You want to have really good investors. In biotech, it's important, to understand that the road in biotech to profitability may be a long time. That's very different than the road to value. I think investors recognize the value of biotech companies. I mean, Moderna, for example, was worth, a number of billions of dollars before we had any problems. But the promise of it, and it turned out to be correct for those investors, would be tremendous. So I think it's important to have, good investors, patient investors that understand that biotech is not going to turn into products immediately. It's important to have really good business people at the company, like the CEO and others, because it's ultimately a team effort. To me, it's a team effort between the people in academics and the scientists on the one hand, and then the business people and investors on the other hand. So I think it's that kind of team that you want to have. And finding good people isn't always so easy, especially for me in the business area. But I've been lucky that I've worked with, some very good investors at Flagship and Polaris and Third Rock, and some of those people have done a very good job. And so it's like I say, it's a team. So those would be some of the things that I would think about.
Okay. Well, how do you forecast Korea's biopharma industry in the next 5 to 10 years? And what can you suggest Korean biopharma industry to become a global leader?
Yeah, well, let me break that down into a couple of parts. So first, I should say I've had the pleasure of being an advisor to a number of Korean companies like Genove and NextGen, Gene Medicine, and AproBio. And I think that the science that all those companies have done is very cutting edge. And, they're treating diseases ranging from cancer to Alzheimer's to Lou Gehrig's disease and other cancer and so forth. So I think that there's some very good companies. And then, of course, there's bigger companies that Korea has, and I mean, obviously you know better than I do, Luigi, but there's certainly a lot of companies in Korea that I think are extremely good at different things. So I think it's quite good. I think, how do you make it better? Well, to me, and I've been asked about this in the United States too, how do you make things better in the U.S.? I think one thing, if you really plan for the long run, is making the universities even stronger, is giving funding to universities to do great basic work in science and engineering. And let me back that up. You know, if I look at the United States, the two places in the United States that have been the most successful at creating these new companies are not places like New York or Chicago or Houston or Los Angeles, which are the biggest cities. The two biggest places in the world are the area right around MIT, Kendall Square, Boston, Cambridge and Boston, and the area right around Stanford in Palo Alto, which is called Silicon Valley. Why is that? Well, I think it's because of MIT and Stanford. Those are two of the greatest educational institutions in the world. They also happen to be ranked number 1 and 2 in engineering in the world in a lot of cases. So I don't think it's any accident that that so much has been there. So that's one lesson that I would say is to help make the universities stronger. Actually have universities that are not just good in engineering and not just good in science, but that are good in both, because ultimately, again, it's going to be a team effort. I also think it's important to have a culture of risk. You know, one thing when I look at the United States companies that are successful, at least the entrepreneurs that are successful, probably all of us have failed more than once. You know, Bill Gates has failed, Steve Jobs failed, everybody fails. But if you tell yourself failure's okay, you're going to also have some giant successes. And I think that that's really important, is to be willing to take risks. And if you take risks, some of them are going to turn out terrific. So I think those are a couple things that, that I would suggest, whether it's for career or anywhere, to make things better and better.
Okay. Well, we have received many questions from the audience and selected 2 questions which were mostly asked. First question is, what are the key success factors to consider when turning from science to business? Well, you briefly mentioned before, that's kind of 3 Ps: platform technology, paper, and patent. And besides that, what do you think is important?
Yeah, I think what's important, and I alluded to this a little bit before, is also having really good business people, in addition to really good scientists. Mm-hmm. I feel like when I've been at companies, I can try to make sure the science is very good, and have some of our students, and that's certainly critical, is having great science. And people in the scientific, in the science structure of the company, who are not just really good, but they're going to walk through walls to make their discoveries and inventions work. But I also think you need great partners for them, great business people, who can raise enough funding, who can figure out the right strategic plan, who can look at that kind of platform technology. And of course, a platform technology is both a blessing and a curse, mostly a blessing. But it's a blessing in that you maybe have 100 applications. But the curse part, and this is where business people come in, because you only have so much money, how do you pick the right first application, second application, third application? The order that you do it makes a big difference, because you don't necessarily have money to do all of it. So the business, and then you have to raise the money to do it in the best way. So I think those are some of the elements that I think are really key, in addition to the science, is having great partners. Mm-hmm.
Well, regarding funding issues, recently there are so many biotech companies were established, and the Korean venture capital supported their companies a lot. But there are not much funding from the U.S. side. What we can do to get more U.S. funding for the startup Korean companies?
Well, I think, the more success you have in Korea for startup companies, the more money will come. Money follows money, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, I think the biotech community, in my opinion, in Korea is very good, but it's also very young. And, I'll just pick an example of the United States. Because of Moderna's success, every week there's another messenger RNA company starting. I mean, it's almost ridiculous. I mean, but it's like, but people, they're almost like sheep, right? If they see that there's money to be made in messenger RNA, all these people are trying to do the same thing. Same thing happens in immunotherapy. You know, that's been successful, and so there's all these startups in immunotherapy. A lot of them are going to fail, but that's what people do. The money will come when they see certain types of success. And I think some of the companies I mentioned will be quite successful in Korea. And I think once they do, that will hopefully pave the way for more funding to go to not just them, but the companies in Korea for the future. At least that's how I've watched the investors.
Second question is, what will be the future direction of a new technology like mRNA, siRNA, or cell therapy, gene therapy, etc.?
Well, I think the future directions are many. You know, I think there's the obvious things like treating cancer, heart disease, rare diseases, vaccines. I think those are all targets for these kinds of technologies. And it's kind of unlimited. I mean, really, there's just, to me, these are transformational technologies. And they also have the ability, like we've seen this with messenger RNA, that you can do things much faster. You know, you can make a vaccine, you know, which might have taken many years to get approved. But now you can do it, you know, really literally. Moderna made the vaccine against COVID literally in a day or two. You know, they made enough in a month to ship it to the Washington, D.C., so that you could start human clinical trials in another month. I mean, this was kind of amazing. I mean, something like 62 days from the discovery of the exact structure of the spike protein on the coronavirus to injecting a patient with the vaccine for a clinical trial. So I think that these new technologies are so powerful. They're so, you know, they offer opportunities that you could never do before. So I think we'll see many examples. And again, treating rare diseases, you know, cancer, heart disease, there'll just be many examples where we'll be using these technologies out there. And it's already out there.
Sure. Well, let me ask you one silly question. To make a successful company, first, how about the MBA make a company? And then hire MIT PhD. Second, MIT PhD establish company and hire Harvard MBA. What's your choice?
Really, you know, both are good. Both are good. I've been involved in both. In fact, MIT also is a good MBA program. But I think it could be either. So much depends on the individual. You know, I don't think that you can come up with a formula like that. I think it really comes down to the person. I've actually seen some of our PhDs be very good business people. You know, I think, and with the Harvard MBA, you know, they really need to understand the science if they're going to do a good job in business. They don't have to know every aspect of it, but they really, you know, a good business person gets up in front of investors. They're going to get a lot of tough scientific questions, and they're going to really, their credibility and the credibility of the company depends how well they answer it. So I don't think there's any one answer to your question, which is a very good question. I think it really will come down to the specific people.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your valuable time today. Would you give me my final take-home message to the Korean audience?
Well, I just think that, well, first, I think the Korean science that I've seen has been wonderful. And like I mentioned, some of the startup companies that I've been involved with in Korea have also been wonderful. And you know, it's just a great country doing wonderful work. And I just wish you all the best. I think you should keep pushing on these frontiers and, you know, keep doing great science and science that can make a difference in the world. And the more, the better.
Okay. Thank you very much again. And please send my warm regards to Laura and your children, okay?
I will. Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure, BG.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rhee, for such a witty talk. It was a very pleasant talk for us. Just over the weekend, I have talked to my grandma about this show, and she was excited to hear that I was holding an event with the co-founder of Moderna. Why I'm mentioning this is because any senior you walk around, you ask about a K-pop star and Moderna, they know what Moderna is, who Moderna is, but they may not much know about the K-pop stars. Why I'm mentioning this is because that I wanted to note that how important biotechnology and bioscience is to everyday lives today, to the human beings today. Thank you again for such a pleasant talk. I'm sure this was an insightful and a New Year's message for everyone here watching. If you have further questions after today's show, please email us and we'd be happy to reply back. And thank you for watching, everyone. We hope to see you on our second special episode of BioTV very soon. Thanks. Thanks again.
It was a very great pleasure and honor to speak in this global IR pitching event. And as a small company, this was really huge event for us, and presenting ourselves in front of many global investors. And we're really thanking the Korean Bio TV for this opportunity.
Hi, I'm Jun Lee from Cellular Therapeutics. I want to thank Korea Bio Society for providing us this platform where we can interact with investors overseas. And we thought this was very fruitful, and we hope that Korea Bio Society would continue with his effort so that we can participate in events like this in the upcoming years.
We hope that the companies who participated at the Global IR event find this opportunity as a firm stepping stone to go global. And we are very proud to have showcased these accomplished biotechs here in Korea to the global prospective investors.